Morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Committee on Oversight, Government Reform, and our Subcommittee on Transportation and Public Assets hearing this morning. First, let me say that we will have our ranking member join us in just a few minutes here. This is a getaway day, and everybody's consumed on the floor or in a series of hearings this morning. But we do have a member to proceed, and Ms. Duckworth will be joining us shortly. The topic of today's oversight hearing deals with oversight of our federal vehicles, both our own fleet and also lease fleet. And the order of business is going to be as follows. I'll start with my opening statement. I'll yield to other members for opening statements. Then we'll turn to our witnesses. We have 4 witnesses this morning, and we'll introduce them, get them sworn in, and proceed, and then we'll go to questions. So that'll be our order of business. And with that being said, without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. And I'll start with my opening statement this morning. One of the great things about our committee is that we look at waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, and we have an opportunity to save the taxpayer money, to make programs more efficient, to look at where we can do a better job with public assets. And we focused on a whole host of areas, and just a few of those areas that we've looked at in the past, public assets such as vacant or empty buildings. We're on the verge of saving hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, conferences that were abusively expensive, spending funds that were unnecessary. I know we've saved over $1 billion just in that area. Our committees looked at duplications and IT equipment, data center consolidation. We spent $50–60 billion there and found half of that money wasted. So today we're focusing on another area. These are some, you might term them meat and potato hearings, but I think it's one of the most important responsibilities of Congress. Look at what we're doing and how we can save money or do it better for the taxpayers. Kind of interesting getting into federal vehicle fleet and how it's managed and operated. It sounds like a small operation, but in fact, the federal government spends over $4.4 billion a year and has probably the biggest vehicle fleet in the world of 650,000 vehicles. Some of those are our own, some of those are leased. The federal government's fleet mileage exceeds 5 billion miles per year. And we consume and spend $400 million just on fuel in that fleet. So it's a pretty sizable operation, and almost every agency has either owned by the government or leased vehicles. Roughly a third of the federal fleet is leased, while the remainder is owned. We've seen some reports that indicate that between 2010 and 2014, more than 2.5 million, 4 to 2.5 million, in fraud recoveries occurred from federal fuel credit card abuse. Got a picture of this federal fuel credit card. I think that's being changed out as we meet today, but we issue those cards, and in that short period of time, we've detected about $2.5 million in fraud and recovered some of that. Fuel card waste and vehicle underutilization are part of the problem we've seen with the fleet, and we've got to pay attention to again, all losses that the federal government occurs with this fleet. GAO recently found that 2/3 of the agency's leased vehicles did not meet annual mileage criteria. That means they weren't traveling or being used to a satisfactory level that is established by the government, and under federal property regulations that we set for like the minimum utilization that would justify leasing. In fact, we found, and we didn't conduct all the reports, but we have 2 reports we'll focus on today. First, we've got a GAO report, which is issued in January of this year. Federally leased vehicles. Agency should strengthen assessment processes to reduce underutilized vehicles. So this is some of the investigation that was done by GAO. And then we have a document prepared by the Inspector General of Amtrak. And this is titled Asset Management and its Observations on Vehicle Fleet Management. And I'll quote from both of those. This is, again, their findings and part of what we're going to look at in this hearing. The GAO found that half the federal vehicles that they examined in May of 2015 travel less than 600 miles that month. While the management of federal vehicles is highly decentralized across individual agencies, the fleets the GAO looked at and several inspector generals have identified, they all found problems with agencies' performance of the management responsibility for these fleets. Agencies that GAO most recently reviewed have not, and we've looked at those agencies have not consistently followed best practices, such as one of the most important things is conducting a cost-benefit analysis for the basis of determining whether to buy or whether to lease. I think we have a slide showing leased vehicles. In a sampling of just a handful of these agencies, and again, I refer to the report, they looked at 4 agencies. GAO found that 1 in 10, or 1,500 of the leased vehicles really weren't justified in having in the inventory. But the agency paid $5 million for these vehicles in a single year. Now, this is just a sampling of 4 agencies, and you see them up there: National Park Service, Veterans Health, Air Force, Bureau of Indian Affairs. Now, in the sampling they took, if you apply that to the entire number of federally leased vehicles across the government, we have wasted in the neighborhood of $80 million annually through bad lease fleet management. So we've leased vehicles that we don't need. When we lease them, we don't drive them or utilize them to their maximum. So there's a lot of money being wasted, and GAO found that in their report. The owned fleet is another story, and the Government Accountability Office is currently conducting an audit for the committee on this topic. I'm sure we'll be following up on that with another hearing or at least an inquiry. Today, I'm pleased to announce that GSA will have a new management agreement with Amtrak to save taxpayer dollars on many of Amtrak's leased vehicles. This is a significant news because, unfortunately, and again, this is not just something I'm saying, but if you look at the report that we have from Amtrak, conducted by their Inspector General, and we'll have him here to talk about it. But this report details some troubling history of of Amtrak's management and leasing and operations of its fleet. In some instances, Amtrak was spending nearly $4,500 more than what it could have been paying through GSA when they leased vehicles. We found, again, that Amtrak's, well, not we, but the Inspector General found that Amtrak's fleet is also subject to severe underutilization and weak fuel card oversight. We have also some slides that we can show. Many vehicles just sat idle, not only for months, but for sometimes not even driven for a year. In May of last year, there were 153 Amtrak vehicles that consumed less than 15 gallons of fuel for a month that was examined, 26 of which were Amtrak police vehicles. 2 were SWAT vans. I think one of the SWAT vans, if you've got it up there, it doesn't appear it moved or was driven for a year. We know some of these assets are infrequently needed to deploy, but again, we have a significant fleet, and we have significant expenditures and losses. It appears that Amtrak has also, and this is from the Automotive Fleet Report from their engineering department, February 2nd, 2016. In that month, it showed vehicles showing no fuel purchase for the month, 138 vehicles. There's no fuel at all purchased for them, which means a lot of those vehicles were underutilized. It remains clear that proper fleet management practices at all agencies, big and small, can save significant amounts of money. Today we'll hear both from GAO, and we'll also hear from the Inspector General and from Amtrak representatives and others on how improvements in federal management of vehicles can move forward. Amtrak has taken some steps to correct some of their deficits that have been uncovered, and we'll hear about that too. We'll also hear how GSA and Amtrak have executed their management responsibilities and what they have done or will do to address some of the problems that have been uncovered by both GAO and the Inspector General. I look forward to hearing the testimony from all of our witnesses. I'm pleased to now yield to the ranking member, Ms. Duckworth. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Mr. Chairman, I must apologize for my late arrival. I have simultaneous hearings this morning. The other one is on the Army's 2017 budget proposal. So having just concluded that, I'm glad I made it here in time for the start of this and to hear the Chairman's excellent opening remarks. Today's hearing is a chance to continue our subcommittee's oversight of federal fleet management to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being used properly and efficiently. This is significant. In fiscal year 2014, the federal fleet totaled just over 633,000 vehicles, nearly one-third of which were used by the United States Postal Service. Agencies spent more than $4 billion to buy and operate these vehicles, including more than $1 billion used to lease more than 186,000 vehicles from the GSA. This is a significant expenditure that is vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse. While the vast majority of civil servants serve our country honorably and are always mindful of the need to use taxpayer dollars responsibly, the unfortunate reality is that with more than 500,000 vehicles being used across the federal government, it is almost certain that bad apples will seek to take advantage of the system. The size of the federal fleet has declined in recent years, and the administration has taken important steps to improve fleet management. In 2015, the President issued an executive order that set aggressive goals for reducing the federal fleet emissions over the next decade and required each agency with more than 20 vehicles to focus on eliminating unnecessary or non-essential vehicles from the agency's fleet inventory. However, much work remains to be done according to the GAO. Current fleet management policies may fragment responsibility and in the process weaken accountability and oversight. For example, although GSA supplies agencies with a vast majority of leased vehicles and maintains the database that houses leased fleet information, GSA is not responsible for monitoring agencies' vehicle use policies. GSA has developed and issued standards for optimizing fleet utilization, but agencies do not have to follow these recommendations or comply with their own internal guidelines. As GAO noted in its most recent review of 5 large agency fleets, when justifying adding a vehicle to the agency's fleet, agencies appear to be either disregarding GSA's recommended standards or not following their own. Specifically, GAO found 4 of the 5 agencies in our review could not readily provide justifications for vehicles that had not met utilization criteria defined in agency policy. This finding appears to be at odds with the administration's efforts to get agencies to regularly review the sizes of their fleets and eliminate any vehicle that is not meeting an essential agency need. I look forward to examining today what specific steps we can take to enhance the President's efforts to ensure the federal fleet is as cost-effective and fuel-efficient as possible. In particular, since GSA has gone to the trouble of developing best practices standards for assessing fleet use needs, one wonders whether Congress should mandate the adoption of a single, uniform standard, at least as the default option. Before closing, I also want to note that today's hearing is an excellent opportunity to address fleet management problems within Amtrak, highlighted by Amtrak's IG. According to the IG, deficiencies in cost control systems and ineffective oversight have allowed waste, fraud, and abuse to infect Amtrak's fleet program. One of the most alarming incidents of fuel card fraud identified by the IG was when an individual who was not an employee of Amtrak obtained an Amtrak fuel card and proceeded to spend more than $57,000 on it. Every dollar Amtrak wastes through poor management of its vehicle fleet is a dollar that cannot go to meet urgent maintenance needs of the system or to support long overdue infrastructure improvements. Moving forward, I am pleased that Amtrak has announced an aggressive effort to review its vehicle management practices and the size and composition of its fleet. I urge Amtrak to complete these reviews quickly and, more importantly, take decisive steps to ensure that employees understand fraud will not be tolerated. I thank the Chairman and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Other members, Mr. Duncan?
Well, just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for calling this hearing because the use of these vehicles and these fuel cards, this is something that could be very easily abused, and I think we would see much more abuse if it were not for you calling hearings such as this. And it's something I'm interested in because I remember several years ago I had a constituent in Tennessee who complained to me because the Forest Service was being very excessive in the number of vehicles they had, and then this constituent told me that they were selling off these vehicles when they weren't very old at all and didn't have many miles on them at all. I can tell you I generally have 2 cars. One of my cars right now has 149,000 miles on it. It's still doing just great, and I had 2 other vehicles before I bought a used car last year. One that had 194,000 miles on it, another one that had about 200,000 miles. So we can get much more use out of these vehicles, and I think that we need to ask how many miles these cars are being used or driven before they're sold off, and I also have heard that they've been selling to people who are connected to federal employees, and they learn about these auctions when nobody else does. And so I think it would be interesting to see what is the average number of miles driven before these cars are sold, and what steps are being taken, if any, to prevent these cars from just going to insiders, so to speak. So thank you very much for calling this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Any other members? If not, we'll leave the record open with agreement from the ranking member for a period of 10 days without objection, so ordered. We'll now turn to our witnesses and welcome them this morning. We have 4 witnesses, and let me introduce them. And what we'll do is we'll introduce you. We'll have you sworn in. We swear in all of our witnesses because we're an investigative and oversight committee, and let you go through your statements. Several of you have been here before. We try to have you limit your statement to 5 minutes, summarize, and then you can ask through the chair or a member to include additional material with your testimony or for the record. So we'll go through all of the witness testimony, and then we'll go through questions. So that's going to be the order. So we have with us today Ms. Lori Rectanis, and she is the Director of Physical Infrastructure Issues with GAO, General Government Accountability Office, and I referred to their report. We have Mr. Bill Toth, and he is the Director of Fleet Management with the General Services Administration. Welcome. We have Mr. Tom Howard, Inspector General, and referred to his report of Amtrak. And then we have the Chief Executive Officer and President, Joe Boardman, from Amtrak back with us. So welcome to all of you. If you'll stand, please, and we'll swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the subcommittee of Congress is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Okay. Let the record reflect that all of the witnesses answered in the affirmative, and we'll start right out. Welcome again, the Director of Physical Infrastructure Issues at GAO, Ms. Lori Rectanis. Welcome, and you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Duckworth, and members of the subcommittee, I'm pleased to be here today to discuss the federal fleet, a $4.4 billion activity that covers over 630,000 non-tactical vehicles. My statement today highlights key fleet characteristics and provides information on how selected agencies are carrying out their fleet responsibilities. As a bit of context, the idea that there is a single federal fleet is misleading. In reality, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of fleets that range in size from just a few vehicles to more than 200,000. Almost 80% of those vehicles are managed by 7 agencies, but just about every agency has some vehicles, and about 70% of all federal vehicles are owned, while about 30% are leased. Agencies have the sole responsibility for managing their fleets. This means that they determine the number and types of vehicles they need, whether they want to lease or purchase those vehicles, whether a vehicle is sufficiently utilized, and whether a vehicle should be removed from the fleet. This decentralized approach gives agencies the flexibility to structure their fleets to reflect their diverse missions. However, the financial well-being of this approach depends on agencies managing their fleets in the most cost-effective manner possible. While GSA provides advice and guidance to agencies, it does not have formal oversight responsibility over agency actions. Each agency is responsible for collecting and reporting data on its vehicle fleet. Those agencies that lease vehicles from GSA can utilize the services provided by GSA for this, and we recently found those data were generally reliable. However, information on owned vehicles is less available, and its reliability is less clear. This is because each agency collects and maintains its own data and reports limited information. We have also found that agencies' fleet management information systems did not always have the elements recommended by GSA. Most often missing were direct and indirect costs, which are essential for conducting life cycle analysis, which is needed to determine true vehicle costs and whether to buy, lease, or eliminate vehicles. Agencies should also identify their optimal fleet size and ensure that vehicles are fully utilized. In the past, we found selected agencies often lacked supporting documentation to explain how they identify their optimal size targets, or they did not follow GSA's guidance on conducting this analysis. Regarding utilization, agencies are allowed to define their own utilization criteria, so they may adopt the GSA-suggested mileage criteria, or they may use other criteria, such as the number of vehicle trips per month. We recently found that 66% of the selected leased vehicles from 5 agencies we reviewed did not travel the number of miles recommended by GSA, and 29% did not even meet the agency's own utilization criteria. When vehicles do not meet the identified utilization criteria, agencies can subsequently justify vehicles using any additional criteria. We found that 4 of the 5 selected agencies could not readily provide the justifications for about 1,500 leased vehicles that did not meet the original criteria. Finally, agencies should also eliminate unnecessary vehicles. In our recent review, we found that 3 of the 5 agencies studied retained 500 leased vehicles that did not meet the agency's own utilization criteria and had no other justification. Altogether, we identified almost 2,500 vehicles from our sample of about 16,000 that either did not meet utilization criteria, did not have documentation, or were retained even when agencies determined that they were not justified. These vehicles cost the agencies about $9 million in fiscal year 2014. It would be an interesting exercise to see what this number might be for the 600,000 vehicles currently in use. In conclusion, while agencies need the appropriate number and type of vehicles to meet their missions, they also need to be good stewards of federal resources. Agencies must have adequate data and appropriate procedures that provide assurance that they are using the provided flexibility to meet their missions in the most cost-effective way possible. Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Duckworth, and members of the subcommittee, this concludes my prepared statement. I would be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you, and we'll hear now from Bill Toth, and he's the Director of the Office of Fleet Management of GSA. Welcome, and you're recognized, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Duckworth, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today regarding General Services Administration's role in the federal fleet. My name is Bill Toth, and I'm the Director of GSA's Office of Fleet Management. I've been the Director for over 8 years and with GSA for over 25 years. The mission of GSA's Office of Fleet Management is to deliver safe, reliable, and low-cost vehicle solutions that allow federal agencies to effectively and efficiently meet their missions. The federal fleet can be broken down into 3 categories of roughly equal size. 1/3 is owned by GSA and is leased to eligible entities. A second third is owned and maintained by the U.S. Postal Service. And the final third is owned and maintained by non-Postal Service federal agencies. GSA's status as a mandatory source of vehicle purchasing guarantees that all federal agencies benefit from the government's buying power inherent in having a single strategically sourced point of purchase. In fact, in fiscal year 2015, GSA negotiated a discount on light-duty vehicles that averaged 19% below dealer invoice. Given GSA's FY 2015 procurement of 47,409 vehicles, this discount saved the American taxpayer an estimated $306 million. As a full-service leasing option for federal agencies, GSA drives down costs for federal customers by providing end-to-end fleet management services at an all-inclusive rate. The leasing program has demonstrated savings year after year by leveraging the government's buying power and consolidating redundant fleet management functions duplicated in many different agencies. GSA's motor vehicle program provides customers with a comprehensive fleet solution that includes vehicle acquisition, maintenance and accident management, a fleet services card with a dedicated waste, fraud, and abuse detection team, and many other solutions as outlined in my written testimony. GSA Fleet Leasing supports over 15,000 unique customers who collectively lease over 205,000 vehicles. To demonstrate our commitment to providing customers with the best possible value, GSA decreased its leasing rates the past 2 fiscal years by 2% and 2.75% respectively. In addition to the leveraged buying power and government-wide administrative cost savings inherent in a centralized fleet management program, GSA prioritizes helping customers make smart decisions about the composition and size of their leased fleet. While GSA is proud of the progress it has helped customers make in optimizing their fleet size and composition, federal agencies themselves are empowered to analyze their mission needs and, accordingly, make the final decision about how many vehicles they need to successfully fulfill the mission tasked to them by Congress. Ultimately, authority for vehicle purchasing and operating decisions remain with each federal agency. GSA partners with its customer agencies to help them stretch limited resources and maximize their mission impact. Each year, GSA replaces eligible vehicles within its lease fleet with new, safe, fuel-efficient vehicles. Over the past 6 fiscal years, vehicles added to the fleet had an average of 19% higher miles per gallon rating than the corresponding vehicles they replaced. In addition, 2 of GSA's unique solutions available to all federal customers include the short-term rental program for vehicle and equipment rentals and the dispatch reservation module, which is an electronic car-sharing program for scheduling vehicles and providing utilization reports. As a motor vehicle leasing provider, GSA assumes responsibility for providing solutions that save American taxpayer money. Our strategy for meeting these goals involves maintaining vehicles in superior condition, thus decreasing the need for costly maintenance and repair and vehicle downtime. GSA replaces vehicles on schedules designed to maintain a safe, modern, dependable, and fuel-efficient fleet while taking advantage of manufacturer warranties to minimize maintenance cost. Used vehicles are actively remarketed to the general public to ensure the highest possible proceeds are captured upon the sale of each vehicle. Through these and the other solutions outlined in my written testimony, GSA is able to reduce the need for administrative overhead across the government by centralizing operational and administrative fleet support functions. We also offer the opportunity to consolidate agency-owned vehicles and commercially leased vehicle requirements into the GSA fleet to reduce government-wide costs and redundancies. I appreciate your support for GSA's concerted efforts to drive continuous improvements in the federal fleet and your partnership in delivering best value to the American taxpayer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, sir. And we'll now turn to Tom Howard, who is the Inspector General of Amtrak. Welcome, sir, and you're recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Micah, Ranking Member Duckworth, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our work on Amtrak's vehicle fleet. Within the last year, 3 of our reports have addressed recurring issues with Amtrak's management and oversight of its fleet of vehicles. The issues include unexplained growth in the size of the fleet, potential underutilization of some vehicles, and unnecessarily costly leasing practices. We also found that ineffective oversight of fuel card use has led to fraud and abuse. The root cause of the specific issues with the fleet are weaknesses in Amtrak's management controls, an issue we have identified as the cause of operational and programmatic problems throughout the company. Amtrak management has been responsive to our observations and recommendations and is taking or plans corrective action. In that regard, we believe that Amtrak has opportunities to improve controls and reduce expenses by enhancing the management and oversight of the vehicle fleet. I will briefly summarize some of our work on the areas where we think there are opportunities. Since 2008, Amtrak's fleet grew by 28%, and it now maintains over 2,500 vehicles. While we are aware that Amtrak has added some vehicles in support of discretely funded projects, it is unclear why the fleet has grown as much as it has. In addition, the number of vehicles that employees can take home when off-duty increased by 20% over the last 3 years. Those vehicles now account for 23% of Amtrak's fleet. As GAO noted, some federal agencies have reduced the size of their fleets to save money, and we believe that this is an opportunity where Amtrak may be able to reduce expenses. Even as the fleet is expanding, some vehicles appear to be underutilized. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, in 1 month last year, the company identified 153 vehicles that used less than 15 gallons of fuel, an indicator of potential underutilization. Evaluating the cause of the low fuel usage and redeploying or disposing of vehicles where possible could reduce the need for additional vehicles and help decrease expenses for Amtrak. Another opportunity for improvement is reducing Amtrak's overall leasing costs by taking better advantage of GSA leases. Amtrak currently obtains 73% of its vehicles from GSA. However, it also has some relatively high-cost commercial leased vehicles that may be available from GSA at lower cost. For example, on one project, we estimate that Amtrak could have saved as much as $212,000 a year by obtaining GSA vehicles instead of leasing 26 vehicles from commercial vendors. Also, Amtrak doesn't require a lease purchase comparison before obtaining additional vehicles. As a result, it has entered into commercial leases that have cost more money than it would have if they had bought the vehicles outright. For example, the company could have saved more than $127,000 by purchasing 8 utility trucks rather than leasing them from commercial vendors. The third area for improvement is fuel card oversight. Our investigations have identified employees who were making fraudulent purchases with Amtrak and GSA-issued fuel cards. In most cases, those employees have been prosecuted and convicted of criminal charges. We found that the employees were able to use the cards for personal expenses because of systemic weaknesses in internal controls. For example, supervisors were not tracking who was using the cards. They were not monitoring fuel and vehicle usage logs, and they were not retrieving cards when employees left the company. Our reports have addressed the issues I just summarized, and Amtrak management has included corrective actions in its plan for improving the management and oversight of the vehicle fleet. We are encouraged by management's responsiveness to our observations and recommendations, as well as the development of its plan. We note, however, that Amtrak's work on the plan is in the very early stages, and that effective implementation will require sustained management attention and a long-term commitment to changing the status quo. This concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, and we'll hear from everyone after we've heard from Mr. Boardman. Welcome, President and CEO of Amtrak, Mr. Joe Boardman. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member and rest of the committee. At any given moment, an Amtrak train is on the move somewhere in the United States. Lots of things can happen, and we maintain a vehicle fleet for our transportation organization so that our managers can respond quickly to incidents out on the road. We also run a police department of more than 400 people with national responsibilities, and our engineering department that undertakes construction and maintenance work not only on 400 miles of the Northeast Corridor, but on more than 200 miles of railroad in Michigan. Our footprint can be quite substantial. For example, in northern Florida, we have several station facilities and the auto train facility in Sanford, where we do maintenance work on contract for Sunrail. Amtrak does have 2,568 vehicles. 1,800 of them come from GSA. Amtrak owns 531, and we lease commercially 237. GSA is always our first choice. The annual cost to operate this fleet is roughly $25 million. In the fall of last year, at the request of management, me to Tom Howard, OIG reviewed our vehicle fleet management program and noted some issues with the internal control and monitoring processes for our vehicle fleet. These were ultimately memorialized in the IG report published in October, which identified a set of weaknesses in the way in which our vehicle fleet is managed, as well as specific control weaknesses and vulnerabilities to fraud, waste, and abuse. There was some underutilization of portions of the fleet. Not all required inspections were being completed, and leasing decisions needed improvement. Alternate garaging and fuel overfills were also identified as areas of concern. I'd like to stress a couple of important points. We have worked closely with the IG as they developed their findings, and this partnership has helped us to work collaboratively to develop the very specific response plan which has been reviewed in detail with your staff and which I will outline for the committee. In a more global sense, this partnership is a key component of a much larger framework of control, audit, and risk management functions that we've worked to implement at Amtrak over the past 4 years. This system of enterprise risk management has been a particular priority of mine, and it stems in part from a recommendation of our Inspector General that Amtrak should have and develop an enterprise risk management function. Our management control framework provides the company with a formal process for ensuring that we identify risks to both the business and the enterprise within the context of our strategic objectives and our business process objectives. The foundation of our framework is a system of risk assessments undertaken by the controls organization that we've created to implement the management control framework. The framework itself provides a consistent methodology for identifying control improvement opportunities, documenting them, and managing the organizational response to ensure that we have a consistent and effective response and implementation across the organization. We've also sought to incorporate external review and audit processes into the framework because I believe they bring a different perspective, and this helps us to identify and address potential risks. The IG report's recommendations are captured and tracked through this same process. Our plan to address the management challenges with our vehicle fleet should be understood within the context of the management control framework. It's not just that we've created a plan to address and identify an issue. There is now a mechanism for facilitating plan development, monitoring progress, and ensuring that the identified risks are addressed and properly carried out. We've benchmarked BNSF Railroad's centralized vehicle fleet program and see many opportunities to improve our program. We've created an action plan to improve compliance oversight for drivers and vehicles, and we're in the process of updating our policies and procedures. We've implemented a pilot program which supports our transportation department, and we're now in the process of implementing improved management programs for our police and engineering departments. We anticipate completion of a rollout for all three programs, all departments, by June. We're creating a governance council to oversee the vehicle management program and determine whether Amtrak should ultimately continue to administer the program or outsource some or all of the program to a third party through a competitive process. I think it's important to emphasize that this plan is not something that we'll pursue in isolation. There's a system of controls in place and an organization that's empowered to monitor and oversee the implementation of new processes. We also have a system of independent checks, including external audits and our Inspector General, to provide effective oversight. Creation of a system of this type, I think, the most important single action we could take to address weaknesses of the type addressed in the IG report. And I'm confident we'll be able to use it to ensure that issues are properly addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and thank all of our witnesses. And now we'll turn to some questions. First of all, I want to turn to GAO. Ms. Artanis, your little study, you didn't study all of the agencies, and as you said, we have a very diverse and scattered agency, fleet operations and management. But you looked at 5 agencies, was it? And
Yes, sir. We looked, we looked at 4 departments, and then within
4.
Interior, we looked at National Park Service and VIA.
Okay.
Yes, so 5.
I
Yes.
said 4 or 5. Okay, and you found that we could save approximately how much to describe that again?
Again, what we found in looking at the various steps along the way of what agencies should be doing to ensure they fully utilize their vehicles and justify, we found almost about 2,500 vehicles that cost them about $9 million. How we calculated that is that's what they paid to GSA in fiscal year 2004 to maintain those vehicles.
Didn't the president put out an order some years ago saying that all of the agencies had to set forth a plan for management of their fleets?
There's been a number of those
Yes.
mandates that have come out. Yes, in 2011, there was a presidential memo that talked about optimizing the fleet and eliminating unnecessary vehicles. That happened
And
again
I think the deadline was last year.
December 2015, correct.
And I think you're also doing another report for us, review for us.
Yes, you have given us a request to look at a number of issues with owned vehicles, not just vehicles, but construction
Well,
vehicles, aircraft. You're keeping us busy.
Yeah, we extrapolated some of the savings, and I estimate, you just take from your 4 samplings, it's somewhere between $80 and $100 million is lost a year. It's fairly significant fleet-wide. We've got some instances of purchases that kind of astound me. About a third of the fleet, I guess, is post office, the 600,000 vehicles, whatever we have. And the GAO reported the Postal Service had purchased about 43 alternative fuel vehicles and indicated that the post office might not be able to operate vehicles using alternative fuel because the fuel, one, wouldn't be available or it would be more costly. That was your finding there?
Yes, that work was from several years ago where we looked at some of the challenges the Postal Service was having with its outdated fleet. It doesn't have the money to replace the fleet, but yes, we found.
But when they bought replacements that had alternative fuel, some of the vehicles wouldn't have access to the fuel, or they turned out to be a much more costly exercise.
Correct. They either had vehicles that were not within proximity of fuel availability, or just because they didn't want their carriers to have to go way out of the way to get alternative fuel, and they sought a waiver from DOE to use regular fuel.
The IG of Amtrak produced a very good report, and could we put up that chart 6? It shows the comparison of GSA and commercial lease costs for common vehicles in Amtrak's fleet. And it showed that the type of vehicle, if you look at the red there, that's what they paid. So and GSA costs, they could acquire the same type of vehicle in most instances for less than half, and sometimes Amtrak paid 10 times as much. If you look at the fuel and waste truck comparison, the dump truck, SUVs 3 times as much. Is this what you found, Mr. Howard?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And you said just on one sale, it was like $250,000, $200 and some thousand dollars.
$212,000, yes, on commercial leases versus.
I'm sorry, that was a lease. And then we looked at purchase. Where's the chart here on the purchase? Here's 8 vehicles, just 8 vehicles. And this is also yours, that they purchased. They could have purchased new for $295,000. They did a 44-month commercial lease and paid $422,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So there's substantial saving both in leasing at lower costs and then lease versus purchase, which brings us back to we haven't had the cost benefit analysis of looking at whether it's better to lease than purchase, and that seems to be ignored kind of agency-wide. You found that in Amtrak, Mr. Howard?
Yes, we did, sir.
And you found that, Ms. Rectanison, government-wide?
We have not actually looked individually by vehicle, that lease versus purchase.
Well, maybe in your upcoming report, we can
Yes, sir.
we can get some more information on that. Then we had another issue. It's kind of interesting. I worked some on the railroad when I was going to college in the summer, so I know sometimes they have to buy more fuel than they put in the tank of the vehicle. But there are a number of instances, pretty extensive number of instances, in which the purchase of fuel exceeded the capacity of a vehicle tank. Did you find that, Mr. Howard?
Yes, sir. We had several investigations of those issues. They were referred to our office by GSA's fraud unit. They monitor the fuel usage of vehicles on the GSA that are leased through GSA.
And speaking of fraud, I mentioned the fuel credit card, and I just got a day or two ago a notice from you of a case, one case. I guess this employee was ripping off the credit card, and he, I guess, has been fired. But you had mentioned that you've gone after these folks. This is just one instance in the last 2 days. How many people have we had to go after on this, or have we successfully prosecuted?
We've had 9 cases that we've completed. We still have a couple cases that are under investigation.
Okay. Well, that's, again, unfortunate, but again, something we have to pay attention to. One, I know Amtrak has a lot of issues, and I've worked over the years with Mr. Boardman on food service for one, and we reviewed accidents. They have a pretty tough safety record of accidents with their trains. But this was quite interesting, this operational data, and I believe this is from your report too, Mr. Howard. It showed these are accidents with vehicles, and it showed accidents percentage of times the government or a government employee was at fault versus the employees in all the agencies. And in accidents in which an Amtrak employee was involved, they were at fault 97%, 96.8%, versus in other accidents across the government, 65%. Is that is this accurate? This is your production, sir?
No, sir, that's not mine. That's the
Who's-
DOT's.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is the GSA. Okay. Mr. GSA, Mr. Toth, this was a document we got from you then?
I don't believe we submitted that document. We do provide that information
You
to all
think
of our
it's-
leasing customers so
It
that
says operational
Amtrak would
data,
have
so,
that.
but again, this is information that we have from one of the investigative agencies showing, in fact, 97, it's Amtrak's lease fleet, I'm told. But again, 97% of the time we had an Amtrak employee. Sounds like we need to do a little bit better job of driver training in Amtrak. Just a couple of quick questions for Mr. Boardman, and then I'll yield to the ranking member. Where are we on the use of a charge card for food service with Amtrak?
Excuse me, charge card for food service?
Yeah.
I'll have to get back to you on that. I do not know.
Are we at 100%?
I do not know, sir. I will get you
We're going
back
to leave the record open.
a written response to that.
I said even people who do lawn maintenance now, you can charge on, and we've not had that on Amtrak, either for purchase of tickets on board or for food. And we've lost $1 billion in 12 years in Amtrak food service. What was the Congress's contribution to Amtrak in this current fiscal year? I think it's $1.9 billion.
It's been 1.390 for the last 3 years, sir.
But it's a significant underwriting, and if you have 31 million passengers, you divide that, that's a cost of about $40 million per ticket we're underwriting, and some of those we're not sure on the sale.
That does include the capital cost, sir.
Yes, but again, it's a cost the federal government is paying it. I would love to operate any company, have the government subsidize my capital costs. You were moving forward on purchasing passenger vehicles, and I thought that was in the $2+ billion range to replace Acela, is it? Is that?
Passenger rail vehicles, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that still underway?
Yes, sir.
Have you done a cost-benefit analysis to see if they could be leased?
Yeah, their business plan, I don't think we've done a leasing cost, but almost all of our trains wind up being leased in the end through a financial institution of some sort.
Well, I think it would be interesting to see some of what's being considered in that regard. I know across the world, in some instances, the state-supported rail and then private rail are leasing their vehicles as opposed to purchasing them. And that's a pretty significant purchase. $2+ billion is the estimate, I believe.
You're talking, sir, excuse me, just about the high-speed rail trains?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, Acela trains.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe you could get back to us on the record with that. So with that, and I'll have some additional questions we'll either ask or submit, I'd like to yield to our ranking member. I see also we have the member, the ranking member of the full committee who's joined us, but we'll go to Ms. Duckworth first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am of the opinion that Amtrak is a public good and is worth the investment from the government. With that said, I understand that Amtrak has initiated a significant restructuring of its fleet management program focused on centralizing the decision-making and oversight process. Mr. Boardman, can you describe the specific steps your company is taking to improve the management of its fleet, and what's your timeline for full implementation of the planned changes?
Our plan changes for the three areas that we're concentrating on right now will be June of this year, which is the operations, the engineering, and the police department, where we saw the need most at first. We have worked hand in hand. Maybe the initial kinds of issues that were really raised by the Office of the Inspector General really defined for me the need to get in a much deeper view of what was happening with our vehicle fleet. So one of the early things that we did was we went out and benchmarked against what we considered a well-managed vehicle fleet on a railroad, being the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. And at the same time, we began to look at what the real problems were, and it was something that Amtrak suffers with, and the chairman has pointed this out as well as the IG for a while now, and that is internal controls. And in 2012, the IG provided for us an evaluation of our risk and risk management, enterprise risk management. And when they did that, we created a management control framework. And that management control framework included looking at business risks and also the objectives that we were trying to get done with projects. And so coming together from all of that, one of the things that was important in looking at vehicle fleet management was having consistent regulations, consistent controls that would maintain. Amtrak existed really with all these independent sort of organizations, and they set their own criteria for what they were going to provide vehicles for. So what we're pulling together is a centralized look at how we do that with a governance program that identifies and evaluates what needs to be done for the future, and that those independent decisions won't be made like that in the future, and that's what's being done.
Are you doing that also in terms of fraud, waste, and abuse when it comes to the fuel card program as well?
We're looking at the fuel card program to try to find a way that we can find quicker that there is waste, fraud, and abuse. We would like to have a better system to do that, so it's included in that particular part of it. We've had discussions with GSA about how we might be able to get that quicker. We're a very small part of what GSA really does, but we think we look to GSA first, and for example, in the testimony that I heard, over 2/3 of our fleet comes from GSA, and it's 2/3 of other fleets that are actually owned. So we really do look for GSA to help us with that.
Mr. Howard, do you believe that the steps that Amtrak is proposing would address your findings and ensure that Amtrak can effectively and efficiently both manage its fleet and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, both in the fleet program and in the charge card program?
Yes, I think that there's steps in the right direction that they've taken. As I mentioned in my remarks, I think that there needs to be a sustained commitment to that and senior management attention on changing the status quo.
So, Mr. Boardman, how are you going to ensure that sustainment to the effort occurs? Is there a periodic review? How are you holding people responsible? Or is there an actual timeline? How are you going to make sure that that sustainment, that commitment to a real culture shift is going to happen, along with the programmatic changes that must happen also?
Well, the governance group, for one, but more importantly, in the overall overall element of what we're trying to make happen is this management control framework. We're tracking IG recommendations, we're tracking our business risks, we call them control improvement opportunities, and we're looking for ways that we reduce the risk on the company for these kinds of incidents. And as long as this company continues in that fashion, then we're going to see that sustained commitment for the future. And I believe, and the way that it's currently structured, and every month I sit across from from Mr. Howard at the board meetings, and we go through all the elements of what he's providing as recommendations. For example, since 2014, I think we looked at, in 2014, we had 174 open recommendations from the IG, and that was just too many. So we began right away really looking at how do we control this in the management control process. And in that period of time till the end of this last year, we closed 158 of these recommendations, while 49 were being added. So we've wound up with 65 recommendations. And those kinds of things really indicate to me that our system works so that we can keep control of it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time, but I wanted to follow up with the GSA. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your indulgence. Mr. Toth, speaking to what Mr. Borman said, that going to rely on GSA for help. You provide many tools and services to help with management of these vehicles, such as the Federal Automotive Statistical Tool. Does Amtrak participate in FAST or take advantage of the fleet information management services you offer?
So the FAST tool is actually administered by the Department of Energy on behalf of GSA and our Office of Government-Wide Policy. I believe as a quasi-government entity, they're not required to, and I actually would defer to them. I'm not sure whether you participate in the FAST process or not.
I do not know the proper answer to that. We may or may not, but I will respond to you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Toth, does not appear that Amtrak is included in the Federal Fleet Report. Is it accurate? Is that accurate, and can you explain why this would be the case?
It's my understanding they are not in the Federal Fleet Report, and again, that data is compiled through the FAST process. So depending on what they're submitting into the FAST process, therefore it's not compiled into the Fed Fleet Report.
Okay. So, Mr. Boardman, what percentage of your corporation's vehicles meet the use criteria recommended by GSA, or either the ones developed by GSA or by Amtrak itself?
One of the issues that the IG identified was that each one of these independent organizations create their own criteria for the selection of a vehicle and the use of the vehicle. And so we don't have that. That's something we're centralizing as a part of this process.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady.
Great job,
Vice Chair of the subcommittee, Mr. Grothman.
Sure, I just want to go over some numbers that were previously stated. You said there were 153 cars with, I think it was Mr. Howard, 153 cars using less than 15 gallons of fuel?
Yes, that was in 1 month last year. The company had identified that. They track fuel usage, and they've set the standard of less than 15 a month to identify potential underutilization.
Okay, just quick, a general question for Mr. Toth. About how many miles or years on a car before you turn them over?
So there's standard requirements for the entire federal fleet in the fleet management regulations. All agencies are bound to abide by those. Then on top of that, in our leasing program, we have more stringent requirements, and they vary by the class and the type of the vehicle. From a sedan on up to, say, a coach bus, where a coach bus has to go 10 years and 1 million miles. I can provide those standards for you on the record.
Well, just a basic, about, like a basic Taurus or whatever.
The federal standards for like a sedan are 3 years, 36,000 miles. GSA extends both the years and the miles on its fleet. A truck runs like 7 years, 60,000 miles. These are minimum replacement criteria, not shall be replaced.
What's the norm?
It varies by agency and by use, and as well as vehicle condition.
You'd sell a car after 36,000 miles?
The regulations allow it. That's the minimum before it's allowed to be sold.
Like, what's the norm? Do you have any just ballpark idea?
Again, it varies all over the place depending on the condition and the usage of the vehicle.
Okay. Question for Mr. Howard, and this goes back to a little bit on the fuel cards. You uncovered criminal actions related to fuel cards following the 2013 review by the Amtrak Finance Department's Management Control Group that identified weaknesses in internal controls. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Boardman, why didn't Amtrak take action at that time to address the weak controls?
Actually, we have been taking those actions. that's part of the process that we're doing.
Okay. Up here, and maybe it's just a small amount, the chart's off here before, but when they say that 97% of the accidents in these cars are the government driver's fault or your guys' fault, is
I
that,
have never seen that chart. I don't know where it comes from. And if somebody can tell me where it comes from, we'll respond to it.
okay, kind of alarming, yeah, if you could. GSA's fleet report. I guess GSA's fleet report. Maybe Mr. Toth, do you know more about that chart?
I don't know who provided it to the committee or directly what report it comes from. For our leased vehicle program, we do maintain statistics and provide that to our customer agencies. So that it could have come from that information. I did not provide it or prepare it for today.
I guess Amtrak itself provided it to the committee, I'm told here. Is that possible? Maybe you don't.
Have you seen it? I don't think that's, at least from the people that are here, I don't believe that.
We should track it down, because if that's true, that's just almost beyond belief, isn't
I
it?
agree. The only thing, I just don't understand it, that's all.
Okay, kind of amazing. Why don't you tell us a little bit more, Mr. Howard? You know, we talked about the take-home policy on vehicles. Are there any problems about that, or could you maybe tell us a little bit more your opinion of that policy?
We think that the policy needs to be improved. It requires that the take-home vehicle be justified, but there's no specific criteria for supervisors to use when they're approving the take-home of the vehicle. So there's no cost-benefit analysis. So it kind of boils down to employees just basically making a case that it's good for them to have a vehicle. We would like to see some very structured criteria that could be applied and audited.
Are there any standards? I mean, if I take home a vehicle at night, are there any standards to make sure I'm not using it to, go everywhere under the sun, or are there tight standards to just make sure I'm going home?
No, sir.
So I could take it home on a Friday night and drive 1,000,000 miles or whatever and use it to bomb around all weekend, just kind of a perk of the job?
Right. You'd be driving something probably with the big Amtrak logo on it, though, so hopefully that's a bit of a deterrent. But no, sir, there's not. And we have some cases that we're investigating, looking at those abuses.
Okay. Thanks. My one final comment, Mr. Boardman, is it does look like we have problems here, and obviously your agency is always being scrutinized, look at the subsidy and that sort of thing. And it's something I would be a little more contrite about. I mean, I don't think you understand that.
I understand that, sir, and that's part of the reason I asked the IG to help us with this.
Okay. Can I just say?
Go right ahead.
Staff has handed me a binder here, which says on the front, GSA, Department of Transportation, Amtrak National Account Report, third quarter. And right under their contacts, Tom Moriarty, Stephen Olds. And right inside there on page 8, it gives this percentage of government at fault in accidents and incidents. I mean, that's where we get it from. If you don't have it, I suppose we can give you a copy of it.
I just got handed something here.
Yeah, and you can see on page 8 there, it says 96.8% of the time, accidents and incidents, the Amtrak, the person driving the Amtrak car is at fault, or at least that's what it implies on here.
So I got to understand what that means. Does it mean the vehicles that are out on the right-of-way, that are engineering vehicles, operations vehicles that are single car damaged by something along the right-of-way of the railroad? I don't understand the report. So we'll find out what the report means and respond.
Maybe there's statistic anomaly. I mean, it does compare it to government agencies in general. It's 65%, so it is just alarming on the face. But why don't you get back to us?
Thank the gentleman.
Could I ask Jesse a question? Would this be against the 644,000, our 65%, and this report would be against our 2,500?
This report is an annual report we provide to Amtrak with all of the data on their vehicle usage to include accidents and incidents, and it summarizes the number of accidents and incidences and those that are at Amtrak's fault and/or they are liable for.
And it's
not just
comparable
necessarily
to
vehicle accidents, but it could be improper usage where a a fender was dented, operating off-road or something like that, and where they're bringing the vehicle back in an unsatisfactory condition.
But this would just include, and I'm sorry I'm over here, but would it include normal over-the-road vehicles, or is there some anomaly here where they're including like those vehicles they have that operate on the railroad itself, where it would have to be?
It would be anything that would be leased from GSA. So since nearly 80% of our fleet is leased, we probably have all of those conditions exist. And that's why I'm looking at it and say that's just never hit me before, and nor has it hit the IG. So we will find out what it really is, Congressman, and get back.
Okay, well, thanks.
I thank the gentleman. Let me yield now to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today and for your oversight and ranking members' oversight over vehicle leases entered into by federal agencies and by Amtrak. I'm deeply concerned by the Inspector General's findings about Amtrak's fleet management practices and urge Amtrak to expedite the implementation of the efforts it has underway to centralize and strengthen the management of its vehicles. However, I want to direct my time that I have available to an ongoing issue of great concern to me and to my district and to the entire Baltimore area congressional delegation, and that is the redevelopment of Baltimore's Penn Station. I want to acknowledge that some improvements have been made at the station, but they are generally improvements to the most basic amenities, like the bathrooms, and I note that it required significant persistence before these improvements were made. Penn Station is a central gateway into Baltimore, and we need that station to be an economic engine. For nearly a decade, there have been many fits around the station without any actual starts. Much of the building is still empty, and in no way does it serve as the anchor point for Baltimore that it could and should be. Obviously, today we have both Mr. Boardman, the head of Amtrak, and Mr. Howard, the Amtrak Inspector General here. You both received letters from the Baltimore delegation led by Senator Mikulski, so let's get to the central issue. Mr. Boardman, why do you believe that enlisting a master development team is the most effective and efficient way to develop the Penn Station?
We think that there is an ability to do a tremendous amount of improvement because you have people that have a larger view of what could be done. And just for example, last week we received almost, I think it was 9 proposals to improve that. There's tremendous interest in developing Baltimore Station.
Now, Mr. Howard, you wrote that you are, quote, skeptical of Amtrak's readiness to undertake and oversee a master development procurement approach of this scope in a timely manner. Why are you skeptical, and what other options do you believe are available to Amtrak to redevelop Penn Station, particularly given current budgetary constraints? And do you believe that any of those options would more efficiently and effectively lead to the redevelopment of the station?
Sir, we're skeptical of Amtrak's ability to do this because of our past work, which has identified significant problems with program and project management. We've reported to those. The company has taken action to improve them, but given its track record, we're skeptical. We have not yet looked at other alternatives to the terminal development issue. Based on the last letter that we received from you and the other delegation, we have initiated some additional work to do that. And it's our hope that we can, out of this additional work, we can identify perhaps some alternatives that the company may be able to consider, or at least offer it some suggestions on how the terminal development initiative can be better implemented.
Now, Mr. Boardman, Amtrak has moved ahead with a 2-pronged effort to redevelop Penn Station. One effort involves undertaking the work needed to bring Penn Station into a state of good repair. The other effort will move forward with the selection of a master developer. I want to understand both efforts in more detail. What is the specific work that will be undertaken to bring Penn Station into a state of good repair? And what is the status of that effort? Specifically, how much do you expect to expend in 2016 on the state of good repair work? What projects will be completed this year? How long will it take to complete all of the state of good repair projects? And what do you have the funding, or do you have the funding that you need to complete all the work?
So I'd like to follow up with a written response to you, but let me give you a kind of a thumbnail here. We're planning on spending about $3 million this year on the projects. Part of that has to do with this master development partnership, which is about $300,000. Part of it has to do with a program development with a consultant to identify and prepare for the redevelopment activities. So a lot of those activities are not identified and fully completed in what needs to be done this next year. But there's a new generator going in, a platform lighting and construction upgrades, station Wi-Fi upgrades, Penn Station master plan planning activities, which I'm covering, and then a BMP tunnel new lighting. And some of the $22 million that we've spent since 2010 in Penn Station, some of it you identified as restrooms and other facilities, basic stuff. We did have to start with basic stuff. And I know you know that, Congressman, because you've been involved with it.
Very much so.
But we will get back, even with an analysis of this program partnership, to the delegation just as soon as we've gotten through it. There's about 9 proposals that are in there.
Just with the chairman's indulgence, just have 2 more questions. If all went according to plan, when would the master development process be finished and a redeveloped Penn Station be ready to open its doors?
I don't have that final date.
Okay, and why? And finally, what opportunities will stakeholders in Baltimore have to weigh in with the master development process? And as you know, many stakeholders in Baltimore have been working for years with Amtrak officials to jumpstart the redevelopment of Penn Station, and we want to make sure we have a say.
We have had, Congressman, I think you know, ongoing quarterly meetings with all the stakeholders. We could expect to continue doing that. I think we have the March-April meeting coming up here very shortly. So we're going to stay very tight with the stakeholders for Baltimore.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cummings. Gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rectanis, you said earlier that your agency had studied or looked at 16,000 vehicles and found 2,500 were underutilized or misused or whatever, and you said it would be an interesting exercise to expand that out to the vehicle, to the total fleet, and so it's, you know, pretty easy math. That comes out to about 100,000 of the 635 or 640,000 vehicles that would fit into that category. So it's quite a significant number. And you heard me mention that that my wife and I have had several vehicles that we've driven 200,000 miles, and yet I mentioned that constituent who many years ago met with me complaining about the Forest Service, and I don't remember if he said that their vehicles were being auctioned off either with less than 40,000 miles or with an average of 40,000 miles. But I remember the 40,000 mile figure. Do either you or Mr. Toth, in looking into this or studying this, can you tell me what is the average mileage on when these vehicles are replaced?
We did not look at that specifically vehicle by vehicle again, because that would be asset level information. I think what we did find, however, in our work is in many cases agencies are not doing the life cycle cost analysis to really know when is the right time to replace a vehicle or eliminate a vehicle, because in some cases it's the opposite. They keep a vehicle longer than they should. In some cases they get rid of it before they should. So the work we've done has really supported having them have better data so that they make the right decisions.
Can either of you tell me how many new vehicles were purchased by the federal government last year?
Yes, it was just under 50,000 vehicles.
50,000 new vehicles were purchased. And how many new leases were entered into last year?
The lease fleet has been stable for the past several years. Some are turned in as agencies downsize their fleets, as other agencies either reduce their commercial leases and lease from GSA or have new mission requirements increase them. But the lease fleet has not grown or declined much over the past several years.
Well, how many new leases are entered into each year, though, roughly?
About 2,000. We've also had some consolidations, which has varied year over year, but we seem to have 2,000 come in and 2,000 go out roughly each year.
And what department has the largest number of vehicles? Would that be the Department of Defense, or?
Yes, sir.
And how many of, I understand that, I'm told that in the Department of Defense that some of the vehicles come under your control and some do not. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We only lease non-tactical vehicles or non-military type vehicles, if you will.
So how many vehicles would that be in the Department of Defense?
Of our 200,000 vehicles that we lease, they are about 50 to 60% of all vehicles. So 110,000 vehicles total across the Department of Defense.
So 200,000 of your vehicles are leased, and the total fleet is 635,000 or 640,000, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan, and other members for participating. A couple of quick questions now. These hearings are nice, and I think this hearing has, and some of your review, both GSA, also GAO, and Amtrak IG have resulted in some action being taken. Now, GSA, it's my understanding that you have a new agreement or pending agreement that you've done with Amtrak on your commercial leases. Is that?
Yes, they're eliminating over 100 of their commercial leased vehicles and going to acquire them from GSA through a lease.
And that should result in substantial savings, and we have evidence of both from the IG of Amtrak and GAO about cost savings, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because you don't want to just do these hearings and not have anything. And Mr. Boardman, you're cooperating, and I mean, you cited some of the steps you've been taking since some of these things that have been revealed here today, but you're going to cooperate on that basis. Are there any other major areas in purchases or in fleet management that you can cite today, Mr. Boardman or Mr. Toth? Mr. Borden?
No, I think we're moving, as I said, we had, to begin with, over 70% of our fleet was leased from GSA, and with this addition, it just goes up more, and I think that helps us save more.
And we'll continue to partner with Amtrak to assist them in any way we can in managing their fleet.
Well, this is, again, I said a meat and potato hearing. Let me just say also, we solicited and received a somewhat troubling report from Amtrak. It's the Automotive Fleet Report, and this is just for 1 month, that the last, I guess, we could get before the hearing. It's the monthly data information collected by Amtrak Engineering Department. This is December of 2015. Now, you go down and you see at the bottom some of the problems with fuel cards. This is just for 1 month. Purchases exceeding fuel tank capacity, 26. Incorrect type of fuel purchased, 87 transactions. Incorrect mileage entered at the pump, 28 vehicles. Non-fuel purchases, 102 transactions. Then we go down to some of the compliance and safety review under Federal Motor Carrier roadside inspection, affecting Amtrak's compliance here. Out of compliance vehicles, expired DOT inspections, 33. Expired high rail inspections, 35. Expired crane inspections, 19. Expired, looks like electric inspections, 3. Then we look at the drivers, and you have out-of-compliance drivers, expired medical cards, 52 drivers, expired, this is, I'm not sure exactly how, but it's a violation list, I guess, for drivers, 36 drivers. This is very troubling, and this also needs attention. So this is provided by Amtrak. It isn't from the investigations you've done, but this is just 1 month showing that it's not operating at the way it should operate. So we'd like attention to that, maybe for the record. Mr. Boardman, if you want to respond, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but
Yes, sir.
we would like a response.
Part of the response is this is a yearly total. This isn't 1 month. This is at the end of December.
It says monthly data.
Right. It's the monthly data summarized or
Well,
brought to the end of
again,
December.
Even if it is for the year, it's still troubling.
Understand.
Yeah.
Just it's a lot more troubling if it's for the month,
Yeah.
in my view.
Well, again, we'd like to see that, and we have the 1 month that we did review and that was provided for us. So this is the status. It's not acceptable. We need improvement. And if it was for the year, it's just as troubling.
Understood.
But again, we're leaving the record open for the next 10 days. Did you have any additional questions, Ms. Duckworth?
Not at this time.
Mr. Cummings? And I thank the members for participating. We have some open recommendations from GAO that remain for GSA, and we will actually be submitting some questions to some of the witnesses today. After this hearing, we'd like a response so it could be included in the record, and we will get you the specific questions after the hearing. There being no further business before the subcommittee, I want to thank our witnesses for their participation, the good work that they've been doing in helping with this important study. We look forward to having you back as you complete your study on some of our vehicle review of the federal fleet. And again, I thank everyone for their attention today. I'm sorry, I don't want to preclude anyone. Our Vice Chairman of the committee would like to make a closing remark.
Right. I just will say, both as far as Amtrak and the government as a whole, what we've heard here today is alarming. I mean, this isn't the type of hearing that attracts, 30 people from the press corps, and you're lucky we don't attract 30 people from the press corps, because it's, unless there are things that we're told on the follow-up answers, or if we have another hearing that kind of explains some of these numbers, it's kind of alarming, kind of sloppy. How quickly we're turning in the cars, or not knowing how quickly we turn in the cars. I would think, there are always some irresponsible people who turn over their cars really quickly, and if they want to be spendthrifts, that's with their own money. But the possible numbers out there are alarming. The number of accidents perhaps caused by government employees is alarming. I sometimes think, I'm a new guy up here in Washington, that people here just think this is good enough. But people right now are very alarmed at what they feel is an out-of-control government. And I'll just say that I think the government collectively is lucky that we don't have a lot of members of the press paying attention today, because this is the type of thing, if I talk back home to a Rotary Club or Kiwanis Club or something, they're like, holy cow. So I hope you leave here with a sense of urgency and changing the way we spend people's money. But I'd like to thank the subcommittee chairman for bringing this very interesting topic to our attention.
Again, I thank the Vice Chairman, the ranking member of the subcommittee, full committee, and others for their participation. Our witnesses, this hearing is adjourned.